Ooh, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th installment of Shot of Nostalgia, Saturday night's main event. We are live here at the No Cell Studio Incorporated, right? That's what we can call it. Turnbuckle Tavern. I'm good old Mike Belcaster, you know me, and joining us, as always, our co-host with the most
live from the No Cell Studios, the Tavern, ACEFIELD Retro, and joined again for the first time this season. Man, that guy who's going to be crowned with the Mullet Championship of America, Colton Jesse. What's up, dude?
What's up, fellas? Man, what an intro. Glad to be back. back to the three-way here, going three wide for Shot of Nostalgia, Saturday night's main event. Man, yeah, it's been a busy ass into the summer and beginning of the fall. I've not had as much pod time as I like, so it's good to be back here with you guys.
Yeah, we missed you greatly, man. It's great to have you back here, and everybody enjoyed having you for Shot of Nostalgia with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And welcome to the ride. I know the ride's bumpy to get to 1987. You had to drive through. We were in 85. We missed you. 86, we missed you, but now you're here in 87 as we are right about to do WrestleMania 3, one of the biggest events of wrestling history, not just WWF, WWE. Belcaster, WrestleMania 3 lives in lore, and right now we're on the build to it. Your thoughts as we kind of approach the build, because I think the event itself lives in this glass case for wrestling fans, but seeing the behind the scenes of how it's built, are you looking at the event differently, or is it just kind of a different perspective for you?
Oh, I'm totally looking at the event differently. That's the cool thing about this journey is like we are getting it's a buildup that a lot of us probably, especially us covering this, have not seen before. It's just a lot of steam going into it. The last two Manias held so dearly on Saturday night's main event, so it's just so crazy to see how important the show was towards the success of the WrestleManias and the WWF at the time.
And Colton, we were talking about off air prior to getting on here, and something Belcaster and I talk about on a weekly basis is the gaps in time. This is a rare circumstance where, I mean, you were intimate with the Smoky Mountain Wrestling catalog we had. It was week after week. We see the progression of characters slowly as it might be. This is big jumps in time where we're jumping through years after 2 episodes. Your thoughts initially on just kind of seeing the growth, even over the last 2 episodes. We bypassed a few months just in these 2 episodes we're covering today.
Yeah, I had to double check with you a couple of times when you told me what the episodes were going to be for this show. I was like, wait a minute, there's not something in between January and then March. Like there's no other show beginning of first week of January and the very last week of March. So yeah, man, I don't know. It's been fun. I like it. It's as much as I enjoyed doing Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I mean, it was a lot to cover every single week, and you know, there's these big gaps. I don't know. It's just a different, coming at it from a different angle. I really enjoy it. It kind of leaves us to fill in the blanks on our own a little bit. But you know, we also have those good as gold hard copies of the newsletter that you got your hands on for this season that help us fill in some of those gaps, which is great.
Oh yeah, and I think this season's unique, and it's probably the most unique season we've done so far. And putting the surrounding clues into these events. And we've all been familiar watching, of course, Hogan versus Andre, even Ricky Steamboat versus Macho Man, but even the build to WrestleMania 2 we covered just a couple weeks ago. All these things live in moments, and I think people sensationalize these events. And I think what it's really done, it's lifted up the veil, revealed a couple of these warts, Belcaster, that we're seeing, where everyone wants to say how great it was and how nostalgic this time is, that people look back on, that nothing was bad in the company, but we're seeing that fans were just as cynical back then as they are now.
100%. And then, I mean, it's wrestling in a nutshell, always, right? But it takes, I don't know, it kind of builds up the WrestleManias a little bit bigger for me, I think. I love seeing the context going into it. Sure, we've only covered like 2 amazing matches so far. But I mean, for the most part, it's been thoroughly enjoyable, and I kind of feel better knowing the history going into these big events, and it's cool that it's all here at our, you know, beck and call over at the Peacock Network. It works out good, man.
Yeah, and the WWF catalog going in here, of course, we're just covering Saturday night's main event, but there's also the Superstar Show, there's the live events that they're doing, so there's context and story being told on a weekly basis. But of course, we're going to pop in our toes into the pool in these events, and talking about it today, we're here episode 5 talking about 2 events. Saturday night's main event 9 from January 3rd, 1987 from Hartford, Connecticut at the Hartford Civic Center, the former home of the Hartford Whalers. This is headlined by the WWF World Championship on the line, Hulk Hogan versus Paul Orndorff in a goddamn steel cage. Woo. And then we're going to move on to Saturday night's main event 10 March 14th, 1987, from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan, the former home of the Detroit Red Wings, the Stanley Cup winners. Headlined by the WWF Intercontinental Championship, Randy Savage, Miss Elizabeth versus George Steele. And we get that 20-man battle royal. And this was just an entry point to get Andre the Giant back in the ring, Colton, because it's been a while. The last time he wrestled before this was August of the last year, and he's not moving around too well.
No, man. I mean, Andre's definitely getting to the point in his career where his body is, the wear that he's put on it over his career is really, starting to show, and that his recovery time is getting longer, it seems, in between each match. And I don't think we're necessarily seeing it yet in the ring. I mean, I think a lot of that's because he's protected so much by the fact that, he hasn't been in a ring in damn near 10 months at this point.
Yeah.
So, that's a wild thing to think about in retrospect, that, you're one of your biggest stars. We see, for the most part, I mean, not exactly here recently, but for the most part, man, Roman Reigns faced WWE. You're seeing that guy on TV every week. And, to not see it, you're one of your biggest draws in the ring for 10 months. I mean, that's pretty substantial.
And he's making dates in Japan. We talked about it earlier in this season about him refusing to do business with, the likes laying down in the ring, and who's going to stop him from doing things. And a lot of the lore that goes into this match with Hogan and Andre in the build is the stuff surrounding it. Is he going to do business? Is he going to decide not to put Hogan over? You have that story, whether it's true or not. I mean, seeing Hogan on the Joe Rogan podcast has me believing that nothing's actually true anymore. But the story he had was he wrote down all the moves, word by word, move by move, on that yellow legal pad. Gave it to Andre on the way, the build to it, and he didn't know until they got in the ring, until they started to do exactly what the match was that he had written down, and he didn't know going in if he was going to be allowed to play ball, because if Andre didn't want to do this, and of course we covered that story, you guys can go back in the archives and listen to us talk about it. If he doesn't want to play ball, or if he's not able to, say he's inebriated or just under, some sort of duress because he's hurt, the dude doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to. He's a specimen, Belcaster. So part of this is what happens if, we could do the butterfly effect. What happens if, first of all, he can't compete? And we'll talk about that at length during the newsletter. But what happens if he didn't want to do business, and all of a sudden, I mean, does that change the scope of where we're going? Does that damage Hulkamania to a level where we're not going to be in the same place we are now? Or what else, dude? Like, that's the conversation we're about to have.
No, and it is crazy to think about. Like, what if there was no Andre Hogan body slam? It's a moment in time that defined generations of wrestling fans. And would they be successful without said match or said moment? I mean, who knows? But looking at it from now, it's crazy how much bigger the moment is, seeing all this, knowing all this stuff going on. And if Andre was just to flick that switch, man, just crush Hogan, you know how bad that would have made not only WWF look, but also the Hulkamania craze going on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we have two cards reviewed from 1987. But before we get there, let's get to the happy hour. Let's wet our whistles and get ready with Dave Meltzer's hard copy of the newsletter, the first one being from January of 1987.
Happy hour.
Oh, man, I missed that bumper so much.
Belcaster, I see you non-on over there. You've been
it's all
non-on
doing,
all
yeah. We got to get to everything.
I swear when I drive.
It really pops with
Nana,
the,
by the way.
Absolutely.
What a guy.
It pops so well with the Saturday Night's Main Event music. So.
All right, let's go to our first story here, and this is a transaction of talent, and Meltzer talks about it right here. The biggest news story, and really the two biggest news stories of the past week, come out of the UWF. He says both Jim Duggan and the Fantastics have been released from their current contracts effective the end of this month. Duggan will now get the chance to join Titan Sports, as he's been wanting for the past 3 months. He talks about the Fantastics, on the other hand, appear to have no immediate plans, basically because there really is anywhere they can go and make money in the current wrestling scene. We'll talk about the Duggan thing in a second. But Colton, you're a big Jim Duggan fan. I'll let you take the lead on this, talking about Jim Duggan, Hacksaw, your fandom. What was your initial sort of entry into Jim Duggan? Was it the WWF version or was it before that?
It was the WWF version, man. Yeah, I as a kid, I remember watching Jim Duggan. I had a Jim Duggan, like Hasbro with the 2x4 and like the snap arm, which was sweet. And I was a giant, like my first fandom as a kid was definitely Hogan during this era, but Jim Duggan was a close second or third favorite of mine, also up there with Jake Roberts. But man, yeah, I mean, you get a redneck looking dude who just yells at the top of his lungs and comes down the ring with a 2x4. Like, I'm 100% bought in on that. Like from age 5 to age 34 now, still equally as in on that concept and that gimmick.
So the thing that caught me by surprise here, and the UWF is a promotion I'm not very familiar with. I keep seeing it pop in the newsletters, and I definitely want to maybe go back and watch that in full, maybe a future Shot Nostalgia season. But Jim Duggan's lore in the UWF was certainly a different aesthetic than he's providing here in our knowledge, your fandom, and all of our fandom, thinking about Jim Duggan as the first ever Royal Rumble winner and being sort of a comedy character through the end of his career. But he says the Duggan move is somewhat difficult to explain. There are probably several reasons that contributed to it, from Duggan's apparent desire to leave, the feeling among several that Steve Williams had surpassed Duggan and should be pushed as the number one babyface. He says that Williams' work in the ring is better than Duggan's, but just as certainly Duggan's personality is way above that Williams has learned to project. Some of Duggan's demands in his contract, which made him the highest paid wrestler on the circuit. But he also continues, which is surprising to me, Belcaster. He says the question now is, how will Duggan fit in with Titan Sports? Certainly the current Duggan character as an out-of-control brawler won't be permitted there, as they don't have too many wrestlers willing to take full-force chair shots to the head. So, okay.
Yeah.
Different side of things, and I know this is like Fed Brain 101. It's almost like a therapy session where we're going to rid ourselves of the Fed Brain. But Jim Duggan was this character that people, I mean, Meltzer, has his finger on the pulse, had doubts that he could fit in. I don't know if there's anyone more suited for the WWF during that golden era than Jim Duggan. He fits so well. To me, I mean, Hogan is obviously the guy you think of, Macho Man, but Jim Duggan's right there as well. Him with those blue tights, the American flag, he fits it. And there were doubts going into it. So I kind of wish we got this like rough edge version of Jim Duggan, but I almost can't imagine it.
Yeah, it's weird to think that Duggan was rough and tough like Terry Funk. I'm very, very interested to see this version of the Hacksaw. But I mean, he really made the whole Jim Duggan character his own. He did such a great job in coming in as Hacksaw. I mean, who didn't want to smash somebody in the head with the 2x4, especially in our childhood? I mean, I still would like to, several people, but still, I mean, the character got over. I love Jim Duggan, man. It was one of my first Mattel purchases out of the when they swapped the line from Jackson. He was my first classic superstar pickup, and I was so happy to have. He came with the 2x4, blue trunks, Mr. America, man. He is. The second up there to Hogan in this time.
No, I agree with that. And then obviously we are not in the know of 1987, finger on the pulse of the wrestling world. All we can do is look back with hindsight. But he's talking about the UWF, and they had sort of this stretch of TV where people were aware of the gimmicks there. And he was talking about that, about Jim Duggan being, a lot of the WWF audience would be familiar with his act, and trying to change it would be difficult. He said, since he's been on TV in most markets already through the UWF, adding a gimmick could work as easily to his detriment as to his benefit, since one of the strongest parts of his personality was this meat and potatoes non-gimmick handle. So again, looking at it, and I understand UWF in the moment probably felt like a big secondary place where everything was about outreach, Colton. Like we talk about the ratings and all the shares and being able to have, like, if they pull you from a certain market, we're going to talk about WWF being pulled from Dallas. That's a big deal. So if UWF is in people's lives through their TV, they're familiar with the characters. I didn't feel like that was the case. So Jim Duggan, I mean, maybe this is brainwashing from WWF. Maybe his memorable run with WWF was so long, but maybe this is something that Meltzer was too in the know, Colton. Like, I think Jim Duggan fits the aesthetic of this gimmick he was given perfectly.
I mean, I think so too, but that could also just be, looking the nostalgia bias is the fact that, we know him, we bought him at a very pivotal time in our lives as wrestling fans where, we're kids, we're pretty much eating whatever they're going to feed us at this point. When we first started reading about going through the newsletter on this, the first thing this made me think of was what we always heard about the Bushwhackers, and how when they were the sheep herders, they were these like bloodthirsty maniacs. And, with the American audience, we don't have that issue with the Bushwhackers, because at that point in time, like, nobody in the American audience saw them doing that shit, because they were doing most of that over in Australia. Like you bring up a good point here, Ace. Like, if you're watching, and if you're in UWF's broadcast range, you as an American wrestling fan, you've seen this side of Duggan. And then when you kind of get this, it might be a kind of a hard pill to swallow when you see him on WWF TV, toned down 5 or 6 notches. And, I don't know. I could definitely see as, being a hard territory fan at the time and then getting eyes on this bigger product out of New York or Connecticut. It's that, man, yeah, this is a little watered down and definitely not liking it as much.
Yeah, this is also what he talks about as well. And he mentions that no newcomer has gotten over in a long time, only one being Jake Roberts. And he got himself over organically, but even he was given a gimmick as well. So all these guys are being saddled with these gimmicks that good, better, and different. They have to kind of reinvent themselves. And, we'll talk about it later on, but Meltzer does talk about a letter that was written to him. Someone had said, I'm watching WWF. These are some of my favorites. Harley Race being a guy who's one of the best workers at the time, one of the toughest guys being portrayed as this goofy character. There's a certain level of ethic you need to abandon if you want to have life-changing money. And at this time, WWF is paving the way for a cartoony, different version of wrestling that has come to the forefront as what we expect from pro wrestling. But at the time, and he'll talk about in the next newsletter, that we accept it as a good thing for the changes, but we only could see it through the lens of history being written by the victors, Belcaster.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Very, very crazy. But I mean, I think a lot of the big guys that were the tough and rowdy brawlers, such as Jake the Snake Roberts, Terry Funk, Harley Race, they all went in there and took that kind of, not necessarily gimmick change on the Terry Funk end. He was a cowboy, right? But they took that gimmick that was handed to him and they made it work to a point where nothing they did in the past really does matter at the time because you are so asphyxiated on the character work going on there. And Terry Funk versus Hogan, amazing main event. It's not the Terry Funk we're used to, but it's still Terry Funk. And at the end of the day, I can't feel it's any different between Hacksaw and, the list goes on and on.
Chad always uses this phrase and it always sticks with me about the in-ring work, but I think it has a lot to do with the characters as well. And he uses the say, and I'm going to let him copyright it, buff out the edges. And that's what we're seeing here with guys like you mentioned before, Terry Funk and, of course, Jim Duggan, as we mentioned before, and then even a guy like Mick Foley, who Mick Foley came in and he had an edge for sure, and they let him take the biggest risks of his career, but he was saddled with a mask. He wasn't Cactus Jack originally, and I think he had to earn that trust, and he was the benefit of the landscape changing upon his entry. Things started to shift in the late 90s, but we'll certainly talk about it further. But let's get into Dynamite Kid. And we talked about him battling injuries. He had this hurt knee, Belcaster, and he's been wrestling all these matches in the live circuits for the tag titles. And he was hospitalized in the in-between. And Meltzer says that he's been released from the hospital, remain at home in Calgary in recovery for about 5 more weeks. Although we've mentioned before, doctors have advised him to give up pro wrestling. We expect him to be back in action around mid-February at the same time. Titan has decided to take the dishonest approach of plugging and plugging hard. I might add title defenses for the Bulldogs throughout North America this month. He continues, I don't care what anyone thinks of how well Vince McMahon handles his business affairs or the strides he made for wrestling. And he says, although looking at crowds now in pre-Vince days, one can certainly make a strong case it's been a negative influence. He says this outright tallying, and this isn't the first time it's been done. And frankly, Crockett did the same thing throughout early November with Road Warrior Hawk, saying that he was going to be wrestling and they let him stay on the show and then pulled him last second saying it was transportation issues, even though he had a broken leg. Shows the basic disdain a lot of folks who have made millions in the wrestling business have for their fans. So we talk about Smoky Mountain Wrestling not living up to the billing of whatever stipulations on there, saying talent's coming and they pull out. Same thing with Jake Roberts when he was fighting his demons and he was supposed to be the Smoky Mountain Wrestling champion. Your thoughts on this, Colton, about just, first of all, the indictment on Titan. It feels like Meltzer's throwing the lion's share of blame on WWF. They're inheriting sort of the wrestling business at large. This is par for the course in show business, and I know it doesn't make it right, but at the end of the day, you're trying to make a dollar, and you're not outright lying because Dynamite Kid's saying he's going to be back. Whether he should or shouldn't, that's a completely different conversation. I think WWF truly believed Dynamite Kid was going to sacrifice it all, and he did. Dude can't walk anymore. You know what I mean? Like that. They knew he was going to come back.
I mean, absolutely. I think it's a little unfair of Dave here to, kind of say like, oh, this is the WWF way of doing business. every wrestling promotion was doing business like this. You got to promote what you got, man. I mean, you got to get the whole goal is to get butts in seats. And if you've got a name that draws, you're going to promote that name, even if you're not 100% sure they're going to show up. That's the way of the business. And I mean, I'm sure that they took Dynamite Kid, like you said, at face value. That, hey, brother, you say you're going to be here, we'll take it. And I'm sure that Dynamite Kid had every intention of being there. You know, how many even today? I mean, I don't think there's a group of doctors out there who encourage any pro wrestler to stay in the pro wrestling business after one injury. You know, it's not exactly it's not, you're not going to get a, what's the old line where it's like, 4 out of 5 dentists love oral B. There's no 1 out of 5 doctors that fucking thinks pro wrestling is a great career to be in. Like they're all medically opinion just going to come down and say, hey man, I don't think you should do this. And how many of the boys from this point in history to current day don't listen to shit that their doctors say. I mean, Danielson snuck out of the hospital and wrestled after breaking his arm at a pay-per-view like in the last 6 months. So like, yeah, I mean, that's the boys will be boys and the wrestling business will be the wrestling business. And I get what Dave's saying here, but I think it's a little unfair to target it so much at McMahon and at the WWF as a whole, because I mean, every single promotion's guilty of doing this.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think it doesn't make it right since everybody's doing it, but you can't throw the blame on a wrestling business that was ingrained into Vince at a young age, that this is how things are done. This is how money is made. And you reference doctors not really being sure, even at this time, what this does to your body. And that, even today, I've talked to some wrestlers, independent wrestlers that have wear and tear or serious injuries, and they get diagnosed from their doctor. And this isn't a football injury where you can actually have an idea about what it would take to get back on the field and take a tackle. You can't really quantify some of the stuff that happens in the ring, or how many matches is too many matches, or if you hurt your knee or hurt your shoulder or hurt your hand, or a headshot can leave you in a spot where how much is too much. And I think we'll never actually know. I mean, you could study CTE, you could study the body, but I know that it's in the disclaimer prior to the Attitude Era that bodies are not intended to fall the way they fall. And so at the end of it, this is a rough business. And when, the conversation stems up all the time with the NFL, where should football be played? Will it be played in the future? Will people allow their children to play? Inherently, this is a violent profession. And Dynamite Kid, if he wants to come back, I mean, doctors are going to advise him, but advising is only half the battle. The dude's going to make a decision on his own. And he did.
100%.
So we talked about here, Meltzer is very critical of just in general about what's going on with the situation with really what is the British Bulldogs. And they are a threesome because Matilda, as we referenced last week, is at their helm at all times. And he says, as the folks in Titan joke, the fans will be getting 2/3 of the British Bulldogs throughout the month. Davey Boy and Matilda. And Meltzer says, I wonder if Matilda is getting $5,000 per week. Then if she's an equally important part of the act, which has me believing maybe that's what Dynamite and Bulldog are getting paid, which is a significant amount at the time.
Yeah.
But also he says, what is scary is that someone mentioned if they use Junkyard Dog as a replacement for Dynamite, that Matilda would actually be able to be the second best at high spots on the team as well. So Colton, if you missed it, he's taken every shot at Junkyard Dog throughout this, to the point where he calls him junk food dog throughout this whole newsletter.
Oh, come on, man.
So, yeah, he's taking every low blow shot at Junkyard Dog. The only speculation right now, Belcaster, is that they might bring Johnny Smith in from Calgary to team with Davey Boy while Dynamite is recuperating. To me, that's what it feels like the best option, is to just put someone in those Bulldog tights. And even if you want to bring Dynamite to ringside with them and just have him be rooting them on, because even at this time, tag teams are all about union and having some sort of consistency. We see the tights being, matching and all that stuff matters here. Tag team wrestling is very important, as we'll talk about in a little bit about what they're putting emphasis on. But I don't know. It feels like it was easy enough that they could have just said, let's bring someone talented from the same circle of family. That God knows there's a lot of people in that circle that could just be the best work rate on the whole goddamn card, Belcaster.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I love the idea of just having him hang out ringside too, and like have Davey Boy do singles matches for a couple weeks or something. Like give the dude time to heal, so he's not like he, sadly turned out to be like crippled from working so much. But it's insane, and I definitely cannot get behind the Junkyard Dog hate still, man. It is not what it's not vibing with me. Dave's completely wrong about Junkyard Dog.
I understand that he's at the end of the run here and he is overweight, but I mean, so is half the card, though. You know what I mean? Like, why is Junkyard Dog getting all the heat? And it's not about work rate on this card. He's definitely not the worst worker on this card, and he doesn't put on the worst matches, but maybe he's just frustrated with what could have been with Junkyard. But we continue here. Titan ran its most recent episode of Saturday Night's Main Event on January 3rd, taped on December 14th in Hartford, which we'll cover. The conversation I want to talk about here is that folks in the TV industry have told Meltzer what looked like an amazing timing with the tie and the cage match getting to the bottom between Hogan and Orndorff was simply a matter of editing tricks. What you do is start the film out of where it looks like a dead heat, then rewind it backwards and start both sides at a certain point to where end is a tie. And he said, Colton, and here I was impressed with Hogan's timing. And what we were talking about off air was Andre's physical condition may not be good enough to work WrestleMania 3. So this was smart, planting the seeds potentially for if Andre can't go, at least Paul Orndorff is at least entitled to a shot that you could at least say he's the guy we're slotting in, and here's why. We're going to just show the clip of this tie again.
Right. And yeah, I think that's a smart little insurance plan that they had for themselves here because, yeah, I mean, that's a big if, man. If the boss can't go and can't do WrestleMania 3, who do you put him up against? And at least they were building a story. That's something that I was thinking about watching this is, I know we'll get into it later, but, that most iconic WrestleMania 3 match that everybody thinks about is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Macho Man for the IC title. And we're wasting time doing IC matches with Macho Man and George Steele. I'm like, damn, where was the build here with Steamboat? So at least they were building something else with Hogan at the time, with somebody else, with Paul Orndorff. So they had a backup to go with.
So he also continues, the word is that Ken Patera will join Titan around March. And he says the big news from here is that Titan started on the Fox network over this past weekend, which is funny to hear them Titan and Fox here. And he says it's not necessarily a major positive blow for Titan, but it would have been a major positive blow for any opposition which would have gotten it. In some markets like LA, Titan is dropping off a strong station to start on an even stronger one. In Dallas, they're being put on the station, which formerly carried wrestling every night, which was both Crockett shows, AWA, UWF, regular shows, and that station dropped everyone else. So Crockett has no TV in Dallas. So this is all big, man. Like if you don't have exposure in all these different spots, and we talk about region and some sports thrive on regional success. I think baseball is the main thing that drives on regional success, and the national audience was something that really couldn't be gripped. I think WWE completely changed the landscape of things, and this was the start of it, to grab a hold of all the territories and say, this is everything we're doing in one little pot here, Belcaster. So I think they want to get a national audience, and they're like almost like Monopoly pieces. They're collecting every single card.
Yeah, no, they put houses on all the property. They upgraded the hotels. They passed go enough to have a fat stack of cash to fall onto for WrestleMania 4. Damn it, Vince knew what he was going after, and as sad as it was to see the territories kind of die out and get swallowed up. I mean, Vince had a brain for business, and this was a business effort on his behalf. I don't think he had a pot to piss in come wrestling. He just knew how to do wrestling. He was going to become a billionaire. Didn't matter if he was selling fucking ketchup popsicles to a lady in white gloves or if he was doing it here, at WrestleMania.
So we move to the March 23rd, 1987 newsletter, and this is the tag team tournaments dominating the week in news. And he said, the WWF held a pair of tournaments while Jim Crockett Promotions announced the complete lineup for its two-day Crockett Cup on 4/10 and 4/11 in Baltimore. So we have this imitation Crockett Cup, and it's been very important. Crockett Cup is still happening with NWA still to this day. We see, the Briscoes former winners, just to kind of bring it to modern day. They're holding the first ever, and by the way, the only one they've ever done, the Frank Tunney Memorial Tag Team Tournament. And Meltzer says there seemed like they're rewriting the history books because Titan is trying to let it be known that Tunney was the one who brought tag team wrestling over from Australia to North America. So the results of the tournament, the Killer Bees downed Demolition to win the tournament and earned a title shot at Hart and Neidhart. Later in the night, Hart Foundation defeated the Bees. So this tournament, the Frank Tunney Memorial Tag Team Tournament, Colton, and we were talking about it off air, the Dusty Tag Team Classic that they brought back, tag team wrestling was emphasized during this time as something that was important, and they were modeling themselves after Crockett Cup. So this conversation is twofold. It's rewriting history of just using their mechanism in the machine to drive a narrative that is true or untrue. Who knows what the truth is about who started it? I mean, there's still arguments about who brought baseball over to the United States as well. Was it Doubleday? Who knows? But the thing is, part of this conversation for the tag team tournament was they don't do this anymore. And Vince McMahon is not a tournament guy. Tony Khan is certainly a tournament guy, but I like this idea. Can you imagine if they would have done this every year since 1987? This would be the most prestigious thing in tag team wrestling. Frank Tunney Memorial Tag Team Tournament. It has me urinating. I was like, I wonder how many years they did this. I looked it up. It was a one-off thing.
Yeah, that's wild, man. It's just spite. You can tell that it's just out of spite against the Crockett Cup that it was a one-off, you know, because it could have been something very cool. As much as I personally am a little bit more partial to the Dusty Invitational Cup as far in name versus Frank Tunney, just because I'm a huge Dusty fan and I've got that, you know. But if this had been a staple, Frank Tunney would be a household name to all of us, and that story, whether it be true or false, would be one that we all know. So I mean, I'm not necessarily. I like a tournament when it has, you know, a point, and I like tag tournaments a lot better than I like singles tournaments. So yeah, this would have been cool to see it come, you know, be something that we carried as a banner or like a flagship event year to year, instead of just being like, hey, what are they doing on Crocker? What's Jim doing this week? All right, fuck it, we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna call it something else just to stick it to him. Like, that's pretty tacky.
Yeah, I mean, they drew 18,000 people in Toronto for it, so it was driving something. But they held a similar tournament at the Meadowlands on March 8th. It only drew 5,000 people, and they had Martel and Zank beating Valentine and Beefcake to win the tournament to get a title shot. They did the same finish with Danny Davis and cheating for the Hearts to retain. And Meltzer threw a barb at this, Belcaster. He said, the report I got on the card was that selling tapes of it to dentists would cut out the need for Novocaine.
Ooh.
So I guess this was just
Harsh.
like putting to sleep. Like,
yeah.
But
it's what happens when you don't have Frank Tunney on that Memorial Tag Team bill. All right.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's still pretty, like, I like the idea of potentially doing this. And I think a lot of times wrestling, and I give AEW a lot of credit because despite all the criticism, they're sticking with the Owen Hart tournament. They want it to be something cool. And in 20 years, hopefully there'll be a time where we can sit there and say, I remember when Willow won it. I remember when, you know, Adam Cole and Britt Baker were the first ever ones. And even though right now it may not hold any weight, people are like, it's meaningless. Yeah, but so was the King of the Ring at one point. So was the Crockett Cup at one point. You need to build up history. The World Series was meaningless at one point. You have to find a way to make it mean something over time, right, Colton?
Absolutely, man. I mean, you think about, you know, the NBA Finals used to be a joke, and now it's you don't get better TV viewership than that. You know, you got to stick with something. It ain't always roses. Nothing's gonna start. I mean, you look at WrestleMania 1 versus WrestleMania 3. I mean, it's a success, sure, but I mean, there wouldn't have been a WrestleMania 2 if WrestleMania 1 wasn't successful. But we talk about WrestleMania 3 a whole lot more than we talk about WrestleMania 1. You know, and then progressive. You know, it only got better. So I respect. I'm with you. I respect AEW on sticking with the Owen Cup, even though I've also been guilty of shitting on those belts and shitting on the idea of just the fact that, you know, it doesn't really seem to hold a lot of meaning. It just kind of, the winner seems to be whoever Tony's flavor of the month is, or flavor of that, you know, quarter of that year necessarily. But yeah, I mean, things get better with time, man. You got to give them time to get better.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are, like you mentioned, the NBA Finals is a great example of it. Even the Super Bowl, I'm sure at one point they're like, it's an exhibition game. I don't want to see the AFL play the NFL. I don't think it holds any weight. And here we are at this junction. It's the biggest event in media history that we're going to see year after year, breaking record after record. And that's just a small example of time builds prestige. You can't write your own history. It has to happen over time. And I think 20 years from now, hopefully the Owen Hart tournament still means something. And point is, they gave up on these tournaments because they feel like they're unimportant. But we'll definitely continue the conversation. And the next part of the newsletter was definitely airing true about some of the stuff we talked about week after week on Wrestling Tonight across every podcast about ticket sales for Wembley. And some of the conversation here is about breaking records. And he talks about WrestleMania 3 being impressive. He said they sold 78,500 tickets, which is 9,500 shy of a sellout with 2 weeks left before the card at the Silverdome. So he said a sellout is a certainty, which would be the largest crowd of any indoor event ever in North America and probably anywhere, because I don't think there is a larger indoor stadium in the world. The old record was something like 87,000 for a sold-out Rolling Stones concert at the Superdome in New Orleans. And he also said, do you realize that those small people are going to look like specks of dust from the heights of the highest seats? No word at all on the pay-per-view, but I'm sure it'll be successful. So Belcaster, we talked about this conversation about Wembley every single week in the newsletter, talking about selling tickets, breaking records. There were conversations about, would this be successful and what are the ramifications over time? And I think he was even recognizing that this was going to break not just a wrestling record, but an indoor live event record, which numbers disputed, whether it's the turnstile number, whether it's going to be fans and family in the building. This was still very monumental that a pro wrestling show brought all those people gathered together to watch men in tights doing a fake battle.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing. It's a draw. It's just don't get a tattoo. Don't get the number tattooed on the back of your arm until at least a month out. But shit. I mean, they're on the right path to do outstanding numbers, and we've seen them do outstanding numbers through our lifetimes. So I mean, it works out great here. Is it crazy to think that wrestling is one of the most paid in person things people have watched throughout our lifetimes? Because I think it really has to be up there, right? I mean, how many tickets sold throughout all the years to all the shows? It's got to be a ridiculously high number. But rather they're working their way there. The WWF is rolling that train, man.
And I know it doesn't resonate with us, but closed circuit at one point was a very big thing where people would check out whatever event was happening in closed circuit, whether it be in a local theater or elsewhere. So he's talking about closed circuit not being as successful, where there isn't a lot of sale and a lot of movement on it. But he says, I have 4 reasons why that it will be worthwhile and they'll still be successful despite this happening. He says, 1, the live gate in the Pontiac will be excess of $2 million, which is doubled out of the combined gate of the last 3 live shows last year. He says 2, pay-per-view will be available in 50% more homes, so it'll almost surely be more profitable than the year before. And he continues, the number of personalities, both wrestlers and celebrities, are way down, so there is less cost for the talent. And he also says it has to be cheaper broadcasting the entire show in 1 feed from location than a feed from 3 like the year before. So I mean, we're looking at this, Colton, as changing ground. Like, I know he hasn't mentioned streaming numbers here, but I'm sure that metric is sort of taken in. And I mean, time and place, context, but he's reading the tea leaves here that they're going to make a lot of money. He actually says they're probably going to gross anywhere between $17 and $20 million, which would be put it on par with the biggest closed circuit boxing extravaganza in history. So even though he's critical of WWF and what they're doing to the wrestling business, he can't deny that, man, they are making strides in ways that no wrestling company has ever done.
Absolutely, man. I mean, they're offering a product that everybody wants to see, and being able to do it on a stage that's been more accessible than any wrestling promotion ever has been before. It's so weird to hear it referred to as closed circuit, rather than just standard pay-per-view. So gosh, what a time, man. Like, I wonder if Vince could ever, like, I'm sure, like you said, Belcaster, he's got such a mind for business, and he knew he was going to build this into something great. But I wonder if he could have ever imagined what, the gate or the pay-per-view buy rate for like WrestleMania 18, like Rock and Roll was going to be at this moment in time.
That's crazy.
It's hard to predict the future and know exactly where it would go, but I'm sure in his wildest dreams, maybe he predicted maybe what WrestleMania 10 would look like, or maybe what, that type of stuff. We're like, oh, we made it 10 years. But just the fact, and I know we don't want to wax poetic about the future, but being the fact that they're at WrestleMania 40, which is 37 years after this moment, it's wild. And Vince still being in that chair, maybe in a different capacity, with some, Teflon Don, as we call him, Belcaster, but he's still there, and the business has changed drastically, and there's no going back. He's rewritten the rule book and how things should be done, and whether AEW wants to be an alternative or secondary or whatever they're trying to do, they're using a lot from what WWE does more than the territory days because they're trying to be a media mogul and get that bag, just like WWE continues to do with all these media rights.
Of course, you see success coming from a million miles away. You want to not so much copy it, word for word, but you do want to replicate it as best as possible to build out your own successful formula. I think Tony Khan's got a good idea behind that, and I'm excited to see where the future goes for AEW, but it's going to be really hard to fill those shoes of Vince McMahon on any spectrum, either be it in WWE with the TKO merger and all this stuff, or be it with AEW and it's Tony Khan shooting the guns and trying to get it going for himself. It's very interesting, but I mean, Vince has laid out this beautiful timetable here that we are so graciously is sitting here and watching these shows, going over everything. It's insane to see. It really is.
So we saw Andre's first in-ring appearance since August at that Saturday Night's Main Event. The second episode we'll cover at length here. And Meltzer said he looked bad, of course, but better than expected. He said if you watched the late stage of last year's Mania Battle Royal, Andre looked like he was about to pass out. He says since then, Andre has undergone extensive therapy on his back and looked to have dropped considerable weight as his arms, legs, and gut was much smaller than 6 months ago when he left wrestling. He's wearing the machine outfit to hide the back brace, which I guess he needs at all times. And he says Andre Hogan should be a terrible match. However, as long as it's not an embarrassing match, much like Mr. T and Piper from the year before, then no harm will be done. Nobody expects it to be good. So, Colton, I mean, this is something, again, we're so tuned in to what WWE tells us to believe. When you first watched Hogan Andre, whether it was when you were a child, or did you immediately say this was a horrible match, or did you sit there and say this is the best thing I've ever seen? Were you one of those fans that could see through the lack of wrestling because of the fact that that's where your fandom began?
Yeah, I think I could see through it just because, I mean, at the time, being such a big Hogan fan, I don't know. It's hard for me to separate where I feel about it now because I've gone back and watched WrestleMania 3 so many times. I usually at least go back and watch Savage Steamboat once a year just because I love that match. But I mean, I've gone back and watched the whole card multiple times. I really like how, I mean, I know this is early on for Dave and the Wrestling Observer, but like, man, Dave I see where some of this just outright hate and disdain from people like Bruce Pritchard and Eric Bischoff comes. Like, Dave's a lot more saucy and hateful in these early days of the newsletter, man, especially targeting Junkyard Dog and all this, and just damning the main event of this upcoming show of the year as it's going to be terrible. Like, I don't know. I can look past it also just because the rest of the card was, there was a lot of good on the card up and down, not just Steamboat and Macho Man, but just for the story it told and, the slam, man. I mean, we see it every single week on WWE TV when the intro comes in, the then, now, and forever. It's the most poignant clip on the then part of the logo of the opening package. And I can look past it. I mean, going back and watching it, yeah, it's not a great match. Like, work rate wise, Steamboat and Macho should have headlined the show. Like, much, much better. But it didn't tell the story that Andre versus Hogan's told. I mean, this is Andre handing the torch to Hogan and being like, okay, man, you are officially the biggest thing this business has ever seen. Take this and run. Because previously it had been Andre. And it's, yeah, I mean, I can absolutely look past it. I also wonder too, it can't be just Dave that's thinking this way. I mean, he's got a point. If you're got your finger on the pulse of wrestling at this point in time and you're not just a kid eating it up by the spoonful, that it's no secret that Andre's not in great shape. So maybe we do look back on this match with rose-colored glasses because the expectation was rather low from it for the beginning. So, I mean, I think about that with the All Out card is, my expectation for that show was pretty low because of the lack of build and the fact that it was a week after All In. I wonder if that card would have blown me away as much as it had if I had higher expectations.
True. Yeah, and I think a big thing with Andre is he gets a pass from a lot of fans because of just the impact he's made in the business, where everybody sees past and like the struggles that he's clearly hurting in that WrestleMania 3 match, and he's pushing through a lot of pain to make it happen, and just the impact it's had on the business after the fact is such a big piece to what WWE became. So I think he gets a pass where nowadays, if Satnam Singh comes out there, or Giant Silva during 1998 is doing things like that, they weren't Andre. You know what I mean? Andre had a different lore about him. He would come into the territories and just take over, and he would beat your favorite, and they would just come up short. It's a different time, and he is the last of the territory. You mentioned like passing the torch to Hogan. It needed to be done, and I think would the event still be a success if it was Paul Orndorff versus Hogan? Yeah, probably. But with the nerve damage in Paul Orndorff's arms, he's not well off either in the ring. He's hurting as well. So like there's a big piece of it had to be Andre, but there was no guarantee it would be. Whether he decided like we were saying before, that maybe he couldn't go because something happened with the back. The dude sleeps wrong, sits in a plane wrong, or travels in a bus wrong. He could not be able to go, not be able to stand up. That's carrying a lot of weight. And then also too, there's the temperamental stuff that mentioned that he was on a handshake deal with WWF at the time. If one thing goes wrong, or he doesn't feel like Hogan's the guy, if Hogan rubs him wrong, there's a lot of things that came into play that stars aligned to make this happen. And Andre, his impact in the business is still felt today because he decided to do the right thing on that day and pass the torch to Hogan. And now we sit here kind of reaping the benefits of it, that WrestleMania 40 is happening because this moment happened. Yeah. And again, it's not saying the ripple effect would have erased WWE from the face of the earth, but I think Colton, you're right. You're dead on. You see that moment, whether it was the first time he slammed him or not, we all know that's the case. It wasn't the first time. It's happened countless other times. Other people had slammed him prior to Hogan. But as we mentioned, the victors write the history books. And that is sort of what we're looking at here, is that moment lives in fame because of the fact that WWE told us it should, that's part of it. But I do like, when I first watched that match as a kid, I always looked at it. Same thing with you, Savage and Steamboat was always, to me, that was my match on the card. But there was a level of, you kind of give Andre a pass. I don't know. Belcast, do you feel the same way? Were you giving Andre a pass when you watched as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like it's like, if we were in our 20s, like Meltzer is writing this, we'd probably be looking at it a lot different. Like, say we were in my 20s, I was fuck this guy, fuck that guy. I would light anybody up. But I mean, seeing Andre through the eyes of a 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 5-year-old in a match with Hogan, they're immortal. It doesn't matter what they do in the ring. It's the characters, right? That's what we're here for. Is we want to see the spectacle of what an Andre and Hogan match would be. It's not so much work rate for anybody. If you're looking at work rate matches and you're under the age of 7 years old, that kid's the next Tony Khan. Like that's how you look at it, right? Because for me, it was always just that moment. I don't remember shit from the match except for that moment. No, I don't think 90% of the world that fucking watches pro wrestling does. It was just such an impactful thing of two larger than life characters being literally immortalized in front of us. And as time told, that's what as Colton was saying, that's the first thing you see on any WWE programming is that body slam, then, now, forever. So it worked, right? The job's done.
So before we move on to get your fix and talk about the episodes, because Colton wasn't here for the first 4 episodes, just want to get your take on this, because we did cover, you mentioned Meltzer being more saucy in this, and that's for good reason. He believes this was an in-house document for just people in the know. This was never expected to be out in the open for people to see really what he was thinking about it. And of course, people in the business were seeing it. You mentioned the Bruce Pritchards and Vince McMahon maybe was seeing it if he even cared to read it. But my opinion on it is that if you're looking at this through the lens of, all right, well, we're looking at the work rate from Andre the Giant and saying it's lackluster, but say we're looking at this event and it's not a success as far as the match quality goes, or it just airs a little bit differently here. What are your thoughts on, I guess, the butterfly effect of where it could have gone, like in a negative way?
I mean, I don't know if we would have a WrestleMania 40 if it had not been a success and had not gone, or if we hadn't had, I'm not saying the WWE wouldn't exist, but I don't know if Mania would have been the staple flagship show that it was every year, going forward. I mean, we can talk about the attendance another time, and they originally said this was like over 90,000 fucking people.
I think 93 and change.
93, and it ended up being like 70 something. It's like, all right, pal, that's pretty inflated, but I don't know. I definitely see, like you said, Belcaster, you made a good point. Dave's younger. Ace, you make a great point. This is not necessarily for subscriber public consumption at this point. There's a lot of reasons that he was overly critical, and also too is like a wrestling fan. I could see someone in this era being put out by the amount of like frou-frou red carpet celebrity involvement. Like it's obviously like a grab to try to get eyes. It's not just about pro wrestling. It's a big to do. It's a spectacle. It's
anything but pro wrestling. It's pretty much wrestling is a sidebar to the celebrity and the fireworks and the who's singing the national anthem type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you got Aretha Franklin singing "America the Beautiful." They've got they've got a piano in the ring for her. I mean, it's keyboard, but still, like, that's a lot of work on the stagehands.
Hell yeah,
just for a Hollywood, level spectacle.
So before I went off on the tangent about just the Meltzer thing, the reason why I need to stay in house, aside from Meltzer being saucy, was that he didn't want to ruin the magic for everybody else. And there's a large portion of the fan base watching. So I don't know how you can watch this and believe it's real. I really don't. Like watching Andre and Hogan go at it. How do people believe it's real? But again, maybe that's the kids. But would this be successful to you if everyone knew how the sausage is made, Colton? Like, do you still think wrestling would blow up to a level where if every fan knew that it was scripted like they do today, because we have access to social media and like anybody could just type it in about wrestling and the backstories and everyone has a podcast, do you think it would blow up to that level? Do you think there was some level of intrigue to Andre and Hogan actually fighting in the middle of the ring?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I don't think it would be successful at all if we saw how the sausage was made at this point in time. It would be a fraction.
We weren't ready.
Success
we were ready.
No one was ready, man. And I mean, as a kid, shit, dude, I was probably 9 years old before, or actually, no, that's not true. I was younger, but like me learning that wrestling wasn't real was like a lesson that I had to be taught by my mom, because I was like, well, why aren't we just like whipping people's ass in the grocery store? Like this is how conflicts are settled. Like basically when the violence becomes like a first response for a young husky child like myself, it's like, okay, no, what you're watching on TV is not real. Like, and I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean it's not real?
Yeah.
And I still struggled with that concept until I got older. But it's and especially in the territory days, man, like especially in the South, man, you got all these mamas out in the crowd. This shit's 100% real to them. You got mamas that are out here beating people with purses or stabbing people with fucking nail files because they beat their guy. Like, yeah,
you need a Mama shirt, please. Mama of the Tavern.
Yeah, this was real to a lot of people, man, and I think that played a lot into the success of it. The lore, like, I mean, sure, you could say it's scripted, but you're still at this point in time in the 80s and even the early 90s. I think you're going to have camps of people who are like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Because of
nope. Yeah, no, it's not.
because the level of kayfabe that we see, like, I mean, up until, I don't remember exactly what year it is, but like, I mean, I feel like up until Duggan and Sheik got arrested together, like for having drugs in the car and riding together, like, I feel like that was a pivotal moment where people started like, okay, we're kind of pulling the curtain back here more than we ever intended to. Like, that was honestly for the people, like Belcaster said, just cross their arms like, you're full of shit, it's real. Until something like that happened, they had every bit of a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
Like, that was the first real public outing of it for me that I can think of.
Yeah, and I also think as well, like, everyone finds out that Santa's not real, but doesn't ruin Christmas for you. In a lot of ways, Christmas is better to me now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
100%. Yeah.
So I think it's part of I love wrestling more because of the insider stuff, and that's not for everybody. But because I figured out what goes on behind the scenes, that has me more fascinated, obviously, since we're sitting here reading a hard copy newsletter, going long form on it. But I think just because like you found out that Santa doesn't deliver gifts doesn't mean it's any less magical. And that's part of what we continue to talk about and what we love about pro wrestling.
And I love lying to kids about Santa being real now. And I'll definitely lie to my kids about wrestling being real until they're old enough.
100%. But with that being said, let's get our fix and let's go into the time machine and get to January of 1987.
Get your fix.
I'm just noticing that's the Hogan from Saturday Night's Main Event.
It is. This is the first time that we've used that clip appropriately in time.
Yeah.
Yep. It is the perfect one. It will never change no matter what year we're in. But let's get to January 3rd, 1987, Hartford, Connecticut from the Hartford Civic Center. Taped on 12/14/1986. Aired on January 3rd, 1987. Our current champs are as followed. Hogan is still our WWF champion. He won it back on January 23rd, 1984. RIC champion is Randy Savage. He won it back on February 8th, 1986. Our World Tag Team champions, the British Bulldogs, won it back on April 7th, 1986. And our women's champion is still the Fabulous Moolah. She won it back on July 9th, 1986. We get the opening vignettes, which I love this because now it's even tying into Collision because we get a lot of those opening vignettes as well. Orndorff declares Hulkamania will die tonight. Hogan then disagrees. Adrian Adonis wants to dish out some payback on Roddy Piper. And George the Animal Steel has a surprise for Macho Man. Harley Race wants to get down and take Junkyard Dog to the limit. And we get a Saturday Night's Main Event, and Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura lead us in Belcaster. And we jump to the races. I'll let you take the lead on our opening match with Hogan and Orndorff in a steel cage for the WWF Championship.
Oh my goodness, Vince, just as you are, the steel cage is very erect right now. It is there. It is up against the ropes. We're ready to roll.
My goodness, what a cage match. It actually had very, very big legs. I enjoyed the shit out of this, and I was going into it not expecting that much of it, but it was a fun watch. Really good hot opener. I missed the blue steel. It's not cage match. Be damned. I missed the blue bars. Even when they did the black bars, like towards the end of the Attitude Era, nothing perks you up than seeing that blue cage, man. I was jacked up, ready to roll right when this started. But good back and forth between Hogan and Orndorff, and they did the goofy fucking whose foot hit first. And God, how many Royal Rumbles has this moment here ruined for the future of pro wrestling? But it was done very well for it being 1986, and obviously Hogan gets the win, brother. But it was still good. It was fun. It was a really entertaining watch.
So this match was really anticipated. They drew a huge rating, and obviously we look at some of the results of matches like this, and conversation on Wrestling Tonight earlier this week was about potentially having a big title change, especially with The Rock looming. Maybe you just pull the trigger and have Cody beat Roman on a SmackDown or a Raw, and imagine the rating that draws if you promise a finish. But yeah, I mean, this is the first ever cage match broadcast on TV. Not sure if that's actually true because, again, this could be WWE shifting things. But Colton, I mean, this is a big deal, and it feels like a big match feel. Orndorff feels like a credible contender, and there are moments in this match where you feel like he could take Hogan down, especially in a cage where he doesn't have to be pinned.
Absolutely, man. And so the claim is that it's the first one on network TV, which is 100% true. I mean, it's definitely been televised, but I mean, this is network TV being on NBC. I mean, this is still kind of new for wrestling to be on broadcast television nationwide. So I mean, this is that's a big deal, man. Like when that blew my mind when I was watching this and heard this announced. I was like, man, what a good way to get eyes on the product. Like, did you blow up TV Guide with this? You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna get a steel cage match on NBC this Saturday. Like, I liked this match a lot, man. I thought it told a good story. Orndorff, we mentioned in discussing with the newsletter, brother definitely has nerve damage. You can see it a little bit in his punches. But I mean, physically, man, he looks like $1 million. I mean, he's a body guy till the end, and the pacing of this match, it's a much slower pace than what we're used to seeing on, weekly wrestling, whether it be AEW or WWE today. But I loved the pacing of this match. I thought it felt longer than 10 minutes, but in a good way, because it went so many different places. It told so many different stories. The having the heel referee who Danny Davis wouldn't unlock the door for Hogan when he's coming over there, but he's got it wide open for 30 seconds before Orndorff even looks over and sees it's open and tries to exit. I liked the fact that, Orndorff's playing the heel early on and tries to climb out of the top 3 different times in the first couple minutes. Hogan drags him back in by that beautiful head of hair. This was good, man. And the fact that they opened this up, the show opened with this. This was not the closer, kind of surprised me. But I mean, also too, I think that was kind of the mentality of the time in '87, and also being on network TV is you put that really big match, the one that's really going to grab you right out the gate. You want to grab people who are flipping through the channels. Oh shit, what do we got here? You want to get them immediately, and then you can kind of, spoon feed them everything else as the night goes on.
Yeah, agreed. And we've been talking about that on a weekly basis. The main event has been the opening match because it's the lead in from a larger audience. You're going to keep them there. And by the end, the main event, the last match of the night, is some snooze fest because they're expecting everybody to sleep in at 1 a.m. But I also want to touch on the thing you were talking about too. I have an affinity for referees that have conflict. I like the evil ref with Danny Davis. I also like the equally very fair Joey Morella here. And having both of them in this match getting involved. And we talked about Bill Alfonso. We talked about Nick Patrick. We talked about the referee involvement throughout the history of wrestling. I very much enjoy the involvement because it adds another aesthetic, because the odds are stacked. If the referee is involved with the heel and they're playing a part in potentially the finish, it adds another dynamic that maybe Hogan can't do it. So I really much enjoyed this. And like you said, having the restart of the match, and then you get the finish where Hogan does win, it leaves it open where Orndorff could have won the first time. He can cut interviews and say, I did have him beat. But, that also is that failsafe that, break glass if needed. If Andre can't go, Orndorff can pull up that clip and say, I had him beat. So Hogan retains as expected. His title reign continues, but and then Heenan gets some of the beat down after the match. And that dude, I mean, I know people remember Heenan from the WCW days when he was already banged up. He could take a beating, man. I know that, a lot of the stories with Warrior and he was very critical in the shoot interviews about Warrior being rough with him, but Bobby Heenan is the perfect example of a guy who's unassumingly athletic in that ring, especially during this era where he can make a guy look like $1 million. When he dropped an atomic drop on Bobby Heenan, looked like he died, Belcaster.
I love it. Nobody sold manager-wise like Bobby Heenan did, man. And I mean, that's not just tickets. That guy sold everybody's moves to the fullest. And speaking of WCW time, Bobby was way past his prime for the in-ring physical stuff there. This is
100%.
You're getting a lot of the good stuff between now and the early 90s here. And I could watch Heenan get thrown around like Darby Allin basically in this day and age, and he's just chilling, doing his thing.
So we get Randy Savage defending his IC title against George Steele. Of course, Randy has Miss Elizabeth in his corner. George Steele has Ricky Steamboat. And really, this is the feud between Savage and Steele that has been, Colton was referencing before. It never was fully put on the heat. It's been on the back burner for a bit. It's been on and off for pretty much an entire year. And George Steele plays a part of this. Of course, he's in the corner, and he plays the Miss Elizabeth part where he wants to save her from the misogyny that is Randy Savage during this era. But Colton, I'll let you take the lead on this. I mean, Randy Savage tried his best to carry George Steele through a match that he wasn't really capable of creating the magic that maybe he was able to do 10 years prior. But Randy Savage as the IC champion, chef's kiss.
Yeah, man. Love Randy's run as IC champ. But man, this match, this whole pairing, it's the shits. It's really not it's really not great. And I hate to say that because George the Animal Steele in ring, really nothing to write home about as far as work rate goes. But I love the guy as a performer. I'm glad that he is a part of pro wrestling history. You know, as a kid, I remember being like, who the fuck is this wild? You know, like his tongue is green. He's covered in hair. Like, also, funny enough, George the Animal Steele used to be a college professor before he was a pro wrestler. Fun fact, in case anyone was unaware of that. He had quite the mind up there, besides, you know, contrary to what his character would have you believe. But yeah, this, you said it best, Ace. Macho tried to carry him as much as he could, but there just wasn't a lot here. And like you said, we've already told this story multiple times. I mean, we get a little bit of a tease of the build of Steamboat Savage here, because, you know, you have Steamboat coming out trying to interfere, you know, trying to get his hands on Savage, but there's too much. I don't know. At one point, you know, we should have had George, you know, counted out for as much time as he was spending outside of the ring. Like, I don't know. It just wasn't it was a big, compared to where we just were with Orndorff and Hogan in the cage. This was a pretty big change in pace and letdown for me.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think a lot of George Steele leaves a lot to be desired in ring. Maybe at the time, I know Meltzer definitely would be critical of the work rate, but you know, I do think the gimmick with Miss Elizabeth, especially as mistreated as she is with Randy Savage, he's very mean to her. Like, let's be honest. Like, some of the promos he's cutting, blaming her and says, "You lose the title," like, I mean, threatened to hit her and stuff. And I know it's a different time and things are accepted, but it definitely rings true as a Savage as being an ultimate heel here. But yeah, this was more sort of like lackluster build towards the match that is epic. And I think Steamboat and Savage winds up being so good, it doesn't need the build. Right. But you're seeing some of the pieces here, of course, where, you know, Savage wants to attack George Steele after the match. Steamboat prevents it from happening. The match was bad, but I think aftermath, it has you looking forward to seeing Steamboat and Savage mix it up. And I don't know if they actually knew how gold it would be, because it actually was, like we say, I mean, one of the best matches, if not the best match in WrestleMania history. And it happened all the way back in 1987. So we have the Junkyard Dog taking on King Harley Race with Bobby Heenan. Match is quick, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It's a DQ finish, but build the context. Harley Race won the King of the Ring tournament back in 1986. He pronounced himself the King of Wrestling. This is what they're doing with Harley Race. This is kind of the stuff I was talking about before, where you have to kind of lose yourself and allow yourself to be not taken seriously. And just, you know, this is a prime example of a guy who was the utmost tough guy in wrestling. He is pro wrestling personified, playing a goofy character against, you know, another guy who's playing at this point a caricature of his character that he used to have in New Orleans, where he was a big bad as well. So this match wasn't great at all. DQ finish. You know, Race and Bobby Heenan get involved, begin a double team, cause a DQ win for JYD, and they continue it after the bell. And JYD tries to lunge at Race, and then Danny Davis gets involved again. Very busy tonight. JYD pulls him off, headbutts Davis to the mat to a really big pop. People are very excited to see Danny Davis get hit. And then he picks him up after the fact. Even though he's the ref, even though he's been a slimy official, he picks him up and puts him in the corner and says, like, "Now did you learn your lesson?" So, you know, that's the story here, but not too memorable. Any thoughts on this, Colton?
You know, like, it's not terribly memorable. But I think you hit the nail on the head with Danny Davis putting in overtime. Also Heenan here as well. They should be getting the biggest payday besides Hogan, maybe Elvis Card tonight. But I don't know. As much as I was mad at Dave for going so hard on Junkyard Dog and calling him junk food dog, I think that's pretty hateful. But yeah, I mean, we're starting to see it here. You know, he's definitely in the twilight of his career, and it shows in this match.
So we got an interview with Bobby Heenan, convinced that Paul Orndorff is the heavyweight champion, letting everybody know. And the footage will be shown over and over again. And I do like this because it also keeps the heel Paul Orndorff credible after he just turned heel. He is a guy that you could plug and play if needed, of course, with the unsteady nature of not only just the WrestleMania 3 main event, but main events throughout the spring and summer. Like, you need something to plug in and have someone to go against Hogan. And you need someone who's legit. And at this point, with Roddy Piper being a face, and they thought at this point, we actually saw the video on, I believe it's on the next episode, where they have the twilight of Roddy Piper's career, where they believe he's going off to Hollywood and that he's retiring, which is so laughable thing now because there's so much of his career left and no one truly retires Belcaster, but they were desperate. They wanted to make sure that the top of the card was solidified, especially with unsteady ground with some of these guys with the injury issues. And it wasn't like it became in like the late 80s and in 89, 90, 91, where you had these guys that kind of were established. You get the Earthquake program, eventually Warrior, even like a guy like Rick Rude could be plugged in. But at this point, you really needed to drive ratings by having a guy who people believed that Hogan could lose to. And Orndorff was that guy at this moment. He was the only guy aside from Andre.
Yeah, I give WWE huge credit for interweaving stuff like that. So you have backup plans. I mean, not everybody thinks in that wide mindset. It's usually tunnel vision, especially come to wrestling. Like, you have a path to get to, you're driving down that road, you're stopping and you're getting off at that exit, and then you're getting back on. They have a beautiful 4-lane highway going on right here with multiple exits and an express lane. So they're doing the right thing here by keeping a second case of cards under their sleeves.
Agreed. And we move into this next match. It's Adrian Adonis with Jimmy Hart taking on Roddy Piper. And this is supposed to be the payoff match that they were looking for. Eventually, we'll get the payoff at WrestleMania. But we saw Adrian Adonis get ridden off TV for 3 months with being hit by the crutch. Of course, we know he was released and then brought back. So they actually put in commentary from the last show saying that he got hurt, so they were going to try to leave him off TV. But they brought him back. So here he is with this feud with Piper, and Adrian Adonis, for the out-of-shape nature of him, still able to do a lot of meaningful things in the ring, and Piper is very entertaining. It's interesting to see him as a babyface here. He's such a good heel, but seeing him as a babyface in this era, and you got to remember too. I mean, Piper is a veteran here, and the fact that he would have been retiring in '87 wouldn't have been far off because he was active through the '70s, and so he wasn't like it wasn't a surprise to people that he might have been retiring, especially with his inroads into Hollywood. So the fact that he was going to be setting up that retirement match against Adonis for WrestleMania 3 wasn't shocking. I mean, it's now to look at it because especially how long he lasted the business, and the dude was a tag team champion in 2008. So he stayed around a long time. But this is a count out finish. We got Adonis' spray can, perfume, spraying in Piper's eyes, and then Piper is staggering around blinded, can't get back in the ring, and only goes 3 minutes and 48 seconds. This is more just storyline advancement.
Yeah, it's a quick one. But I like what you said there, Ace, about, it didn't shock anybody that at this time that he might be retiring, mainly because I think most people expected Piper to spend a little bit more time in Hollywood than he did and have a little bit more of a rich career there. But selfishly, I'm glad he came back to wrestling and spent so much time there because I never get enough Roddy Piper.
So we get a quick Hogan promo with Mean Gene. He's referencing that footage, and he said he's not really worried about the footage. He's still champion, even if he tied. Tie goes to the champion, and he's still champion no matter what. And we lead into our, quote, main event. It's not really a main event. Everyone's snoozing by this time on the couch. You got some drool coming down your face. But if you were awake, Blackjack Mulligan was taking on Jimmy Jack Funk. Woo. And Blackjack Mulligan, has some lore in wrestling lineage, and this would be his last big run in the WWF. And as for Jimmy Jack Funk, you guys may know him as Jesse Barr from Florida territories, but if not, doesn't really matter. He doesn't really make an impact here. It's a quick killer match. Blackjack completely destroys him, jumping back elbow, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And then after the match, Mulligan tries to hang Funk with his bull rope. And at this point, that's where the show goes off the air. And Belcaster and I were talking about it last week, Colton, and we think about watchability and we go back and check this out. And I think the mindset here is similar to live sports where this is just happening and they're not thinking that someone's going to go back in time and watch the full catalog. So they're just stacking it at the end just to fill time for a time that they know no one's really going to be watching. And if they are, they're diehard fans. But they didn't expect the way the card was constructed that this was going to have any watchability in the future, like an NFL game. Monday Night Football is on Mondays. Who is going back aside from just an absolute nutcase of a fan going back and watching a week that doesn't have really meaningful significance as far as the full card goes? And this is something they never expected someone to watch.
Yeah, man. Nobody but nerds like us, man.
Exactly.
But Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. I think, especially with this main event here, I mean, they were obviously they were getting what they had to in, but 2.5 minutes for a main event. I mean, you are just trying to fill your TV time before you're going dark.
So moving on to our next episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, number 10, March 14th, 1987, from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan, home of the Motor City Machine Guns. Shout out to my good friends, Motor City Machine Guns. This was taped on 2/21/1987. Almost a full month has gone by since they taped this. Risky move. And the interesting, too, the one we're going to cover next week is taped before WrestleMania 3, but airs after WrestleMania 3.
Ooh,
Very risky move as far as taping in bulk. Our current champs are all the same. And at this point, we got Andre tearing out the hearts and souls of all the little Hulkamaniacs out there. He joined the Heenan family, and we get that clip here. Hogan wants revenge, and Elizabeth is kind of scared by Macho. He's turned up the heat as far as being a misogynist and being very angry at Liz during the 2 months we've just kind of left them. And then we get led into Vince and Jesse letting us in, which is always the familiar face. And Colton, I'll let you take the lead on the IC Championship match. It's that familiar matchup we just saw last week. Randy Savage defending against George Steele.
You're going to give me this one 2 times in a row?
It was just as bad. I think you did such a good job covering before. I want to hear what you say about it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I'm glad to see. I can't say that I'm surprised that we're going to see this, because there really was no resolution to it in the previous, a month prior. There was really no resolution. So, but yeah, we get another one of these. This one's got a special stipulation, though. And, man, you want to talk about having the misogyny cranked up to 11 here. This is a title match, so whoever wins is getting the strap, and they get Elizabeth, which is extremely problematic in hindsight. But, like you said, different time. Elizabeth really doesn't have much to say here. I will say I do like at least that this match has a little bit more, since this is for the literal possession of Miss Elizabeth. She's posted up in a like lifeguard style chair where she's like above it all, kind of watching everything happen. But yeah, either way, Elizabeth loses here. She's either stuck with Macho being toxically macho, or she has to run off with the furry animal, green tongued George Steele. So yeah, kind of shit, or even more shit for poor Elizabeth here. But this was much quicker than the last one. This one only goes about 4.5 minutes, and I mean, Steele, I don't know if he thinks he's saving Elizabeth or what, but like as soon as this starts, Steele goes to look at her. He runs off, tries to grab her. Savage goes after him. He grabs Elizabeth. He tries to take her to the locker room. He's running around the ring again. I mean, at this point, he's outside the ring for this is a 4-minute match. George is outside of the ring for over 2 minutes. How this wasn't a count out, I don't know. It's just absolute bullshit and chaos. But, and I mean, why are we giving George Steele so many title shots? Because by my count, he hasn't won a match against Macho. Not in 87. But he's getting multiple shots. So...
he never has the upper hand. The only reason he's involved in this is because he has an infatuation with Elizabeth. So we're going to give him a title shot for that? We're rewarding behavior?
If we're giving people, that could have been anybody on the roster at this point. She's a beautiful woman. And we're just going to hand out title shots for somebody having an infatuation with Miss Elizabeth. I mean, yeah, you just get a different opponent every single week if we're going by that logic. But, Macho retains here. Elizabeth's situation really doesn't change other than she doesn't have to receive gifts from George Steele, which is just his own action figure. I don't know. Pretty weird shit here. Weird way to open the show, especially considering the episode prior was such a heater.
Yeah.
So we move into that 20-man battle royal over here, and we have some participants that are included. Andre the Giant, of course, making his in-ring return since August. Outlaw Ron Bass, Demolition Axe and Smash, Billy Jack Haynes, Hillbilly Jim, the Honky Tonk Man, Hulk Hogan, the Islanders, Haku and Tama, the Killer Bees, which is Brian Blair and Jim Brunzell, Blackjack Mulligan, Paul Orndorff, Lenny Poffo, Butch Reed, Sika, Nikolai Volkov, and Coco Beware. So this is a battle royal, which I have my critiques on battle royal. It's not a huge fan, but I do understand why they did this, especially where you wanted Andre on TV, you didn't want to expose him, or didn't want to. Maybe it's not even the word exposed. Maybe you didn't want to give up the allure of having Andre in a one-on-one match in any way, but he had to get the ring rust off in some way and bring some, you had to have the moment with Hogan. You need to make sure that build was there. There is prize money involved in this, but we never got the amount. Correct me if I'm wrong. They didn't tell us how much, because I know when they did the body slam contest with Big John Studd, we find out how much money is on the line. I think it was like $50,000 to $100,000. Nothing was said here. They usually make it aware what it is.
Yeah.
I missed it. If it's there, someone
No,
come on.
I don't think any checks were cashed after this battle royal there.
This is the first time Hogan and Andre have crossed paths since Andre joined the Heenan family, and he makes his intentions clear. They do the old trope in battle royals where he's the giant, so everyone goes after him, but it doesn't work out. Does not work out the way they want it to work out, and we see eliminations. Hogan eliminates Honky Tonk Man in the first 30 seconds. Andre dumps Sika. The Heenan family remains on top of Hulk Hogan, and the Islanders go after Andre. It goes back and forth. The other thing, too, is Lenny Poffo gets busted open big time.
Yeah.
And has to be, I mean, Meltzer said in the newsletter that it was a blade job because Haku headbutts him, and, the Samoans are supposed to have the very unbreakable heads, like it's the unstoppable thing, and busted Lenny Poffo open. And, I'm sorry, Andre is the one that headbutted him, not Haku, but, the point remains. He is well busted open, and Meltzer says, and he didn't go back and fact check it, but this might be the first time NBC has had wrestling with blood on there, and it's Lanny Poffo, who I can't wait to see Hogan wrestle Poffo. I know the Extra Cooler Boys covered it in full. One of my favorite matches on Saturday Night's Main Event. Poffo is very underrated, underrated, but we can go back and forth with all the spots here, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, we get Hercules Hernandez winning the Battle Royal in 11 minutes and 16 seconds. The main thing is that this is just to get Hogan and Andre in the ring together for free TV to let people know a couple weeks prior to WrestleMania 3 that these guys are going to be in action, across the ring from each other in the Pontiac Silverdome, and they're going to want to drive it, that you want more and more. So, Belcaster, your thoughts on this Battle Royal? Not huge on it. A lot of personalities in here. But I do accept the fact that this is what they had to do to get Andre and Hogan in the ring in some capacity.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you have to tell the story, advance it a little bit. This was just a backstage segment, but in the ring with 18 other guys in there, basically. But it was good. I popped at Lanny getting busted open. I popped at seeing Haku. Like, there's a lot of good, like, small little happy moments during this where I was like, oh, this is cool. But like the novelty wears off quick. The spot where everybody teams up and dog piles on Andre, and there's so much gimmicky shit that they do in this battle royal that it's not a favorite. It's not in my top 10 of battle royals I've seen in my lifetime, I'll tell you that. But for story wise, it was good. Andre and Hogan, I mean, Hogan's selling the shit out of, back into the wall. Brother, what's going on? No, not you, brother. There's got a lot of good comical moments here. A lot of good, shit, like Hogan and Andre back and forth, but it was all right.
Them exchange, like them being isolated in the ring and in the moment was really cool. And obviously Andre eliminates Hogan, and then it takes 8 guys to eliminate Andre. And then we see Billy Jack Haynes and Hercules being the last 2 guys, which is so secondary. And Ventura had a great line. He just called Billy Jack Haynes dumb, like on his way out, because the way it worked out was he's going after Heenan, which allows Hercules to come up from behind and lift him over the top rope to win the match. And
goofy,
a veteran move would be like, dude, why are you going after the manager? Like, this is an over the top rope battle royal. It's almost as bad as Macho Man jumping out of the ring to get eliminated in the Rumble too. Like, or going for the pin in the Rumble after the elbow drop. Kind of a brain lapse, but I've seen worse battle royals. I'll give them that. It wasn't the worst battle royal ever, and it may be just nostalgia and some of the great guys in here. But if I never see another battle royal in my life, I'll be happy.
when you have the Royal Rumble, which is such a better concept of somebody coming in every few minutes, why would you have a battle royal where you just throw fucking 20 dudes in there to start, and it's just a clusterfuck?
Yeah.
So we get Mean Gene standing alongside Andre and Bobby Heenan. Heenan makes it clear that Andre took out Hogan, but it took 8 huge men to take out Andre. So by that logic, it's not Steiner math, it's Heenan math. So we have our next match here in Belcast. I'll let you take the lead on this. King Kong Bundy with Bobby Heenan taking on Jake Roberts. King Kong Bundy, there's been a lot of steam that's off of him because of the fact, he was the main eventer at WrestleMania 2, one of our last episodes. He's putting Hogan in the hospital. He's challenged him in the cage at WrestleMania 2.
Yeah.
He's not quite the same figure that he was, but he's still one of those guys that kind of carries this giant allure, especially when Andre's not on our screen. He's a guy who at least casts a huge shadow. And Jake Roberts himself, this is a character that was a lot of steam, especially he's gotten himself over to the point where he's one of the more recognizable faces on the show, and he gets a huge reaction.
Yeah, listen, and this match is nothing but a reaction for me. I thought that's how it felt for, like, you got this, again, 1987, wrestling's all about spectacle. Seeing King Kong Bundy and Jake the Snake, I mean, from my age now, going into 2023 all the way back to 87, it's crazy to see these two square off. And like, I was just standing next to Jake Roberts in person at StarCast a few weeks ago. Like, that's insanity to think about. I wasn't even born yet when this match happened. So you get a lot of good feels out of it, a lot of cool shit. Match itself was not anything spectacular. Good storytelling, I guess, a little bit. But Jake looks like $1 million. He works. He goes out there and does his thing. God, I mean, who doesn't look badass with the python? The snake he had on him this time was a King Kong Bundy sized snake, which was great. It was a bigger boy, but it was good. I thought the DDT spot looked crazy because, like, that was the first time, like, he kind of let go. You seen it in the replay. You know, King Kong Bundy hits the mat first before Jake does, and I was, thrown, like, holy shit, that's wild. But it was a good 6 minutes. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we get the DQ, kind of saves both guys. The refs, like, pretty much getting involved, and, like, they're trying to, like, break it up in the corner, and Bundy, and then he takes a knee in the gut trying to get involved, and then the ref throws out the match, gives the match to King Kong Bundy, and you mentioned the DDT outside the ring, and then he pulls out Damien, and this is sort of the typical stuff to keep everybody involved in the characters and things that they're doing. So, but we get a clip of the Hart Foundation winning the tag belts on Superstars, and the reason that Danny Davis has suspension for life at this point is an official. So Danny Davis that he'll just be a special enforcer at ringside for the Hart Foundation tonight's match to make sure everything's fair. So we got sort of the leadership team in WWF recognizing that this official has been up to no good for a long period of time, so they suspended him for life. But we're going to see this type of stuff continue with the Hebner twins down the line leading up to WrestleMania 4, and I can't wait to cover that here, where they do the Andre and Hogan stuff for the title, and DiBiase buys it with the two crooked refs, one of the best things ever. And they said that Earl Hebner had another ref get plastic surgery, even though they're actual twins. Love that shit. Can't wait to cover it in full. But this is, I mean, makes sense to Danny Davis, but like, it begs the question, why would you just get rid of him, fire him?
Yeah.
But he's still looming large in this tag stuff, and he has it out for the faces in the tag division. He wants to make sure that the titles stay on any heel. He wants to keep on the heels. He doesn't like the good guys winning at all.
Yeah, he's dedicated to the lifestyle, man. Yeah, he's the difference maker here. He gets in the ring with Jimmy Hart's megaphone and gets Spivey in the head, man. Like, damn, can't Dan Spivey can't catch a break.
So the match that we're referencing here, the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, with Jimmy Hart and Danny Davis, defeated Tito Santana and Dan Spivey to retain the WWF Tag titles. The match goes 5 minutes and 32 seconds. This was supposed to be the U.S. Express, Spivey and Rotundo versus the Hart Foundation, but Mike Rotundo had just left the WWF right before this, and they left Spivey to have to partner up with someone really that wasn't doing anything else, and that was Tito Santana. This was a plug-and-play guy. So the match could have been more memorable, better, if you had two teams that had a little bit more history and at least more tag lineage, but Tito Santana, he's serviceable in the ring. He's had some meaningful matches, and I look back at his match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, and he's had some good stuff, but it wasn't the same as having Rotundo and Spivey together as the U.S. Express. It just didn't have the same weight. But, the match itself, like I said, it's not Bret Hart's best match, but you could definitely see glimmers of the superstar he would become. He definitely shined the brightest in this whole match. Anytime he's in the ring, he's the workhorse, and seeing them work together, Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart, it's kind of magic. And a lot of people kind of look at Bret's run as a singles guy as being the highlight of his career. And of course, like, his run as the top of the card is very, very good and one of the greatest of all time. But I think a lot of people don't look at this time as a tag team with the Hart Foundation with the same, I guess, esteem, because Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart were one of the best tag teams in the history of wrestling, and they don't get their just due, Colton.
No, man, they don't. And I don't know if that's just because they were heels or just because people didn't, give them the time of day just because hard to say why, really. I mean, I wonder if, we remember them fondly, I think, a lot too because of, Brett's later, esteem as a singles guy. I mean, I think that probably does give them a little bit more of a shine going forward. But yeah, I mean, this was a good match, man. I enjoyed this match. I can think of a lot worse people. Sucks for Dan Spivey to have to, work with somebody that he hasn't worked with yet, especially after him and Rotunda were doing such great things. But I can think of worse people to get stuck with on a thrown together team than Tito Santana by a long shot. So, but yeah, man, this is I think you said it best. You really see some glimmers in this match of the star that Britt's going to be just, a few years later.
The other thing, too, is interesting, and I didn't cover the newsletter because there was a lot of conversation we were having that shifted elsewhere, but there's some legal issues for Jim Neidhart that was happening at this moment. And at this point, the hearing for his alleged attack on a stewardess on a plane was on hold. It was supposed to be like April 6th, and this was obviously March 14th, or this was taped in February. So there was pending litigation against him, and I'll go back up to the newsletter and read it for you guys. Because he apparently struck a stewardess while on a flight a few months back. He'll probably miss most of the dates of that week. They postponed it to the week of 4/8. But if he was convicted, obviously we know he wasn't, he could have faced 20 years in prison. So, that is something that was looming large there, but they didn't do a title switch. They left it on Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart and kind of hope for the best. And I didn't look up everything that went on after that. I'm just assuming things worked out in his favor. Maybe it was not everything it seemed to be, or maybe it was, and money talked or whatever. But he is sitting here. I mean, we could be looking at a whole different landscape. I mean, what does wrestling look like as far as like if that would have happened? Maybe Bret Hart doesn't get the opportunity he got if Jim Neidhart wasn't there with him. So
right,
yeah,
crazy. And absolutely, like who do you put the belts on at that point too? Man, yeah, like good on him for just kind of sticking with it and hoping for the best.
And then there isn't the pressure because there's no social media. Like there would be a huge outcry that this should happen. The only people that really knew it there were those that were intimate with the knowledge, or those that were directly involved, those who were on the flight, or those like that are on the jury. You know what I mean? Like there's no one else that knows it. They just know Jim Neidhart as the wrestler, and social media, good, bad, or whatever, has created an influx of information where that type of stuff influences booking because you're kind of forced to. We watch 100%. Guys like Sammy Guevara was suspended for stuff he said years and years ago, whether it was just or not to be suspended. That's a conversation for somebody else, but that's stuff that got cropped up based on being revealed, and like the outpouring pressure from, some people call it, social media cancel culture or whatever it is, crops itself up and forces hands and bookers. And I think we didn't see that here because there wasn't a knowledge. Like I didn't even know anything about it. Obviously we're all very much diehard wrestling fans, and that's something that I just happened to stumble upon in a newsletter that I paid money for,
Yeah.
And there you go. If you guys are not watching on video, we got Cash Wheeler's, his situation would have never been known. You know what I mean? Like if this was how many times did stuff like that happen on the road where we didn't even know because it wasn't on social media?
Yeah, I would say I'd say on a weekly basis prior to social media, pro wrestlers were flashing guns at people. 100%. Yeah, maybe.
Dude, I love the stories about the Mickey Mantle stuff. You ever read Mickey Mantle's book? Just like them bailing Mickey out of very treacherous situations on the road where either it was DUIs or whatever it was, destroying hotel rooms because he was on the Yankees and he played center field and he was amazing at what he did. But again, he would never be able to survive in the culture today where, someone has a cell phone, they're recording Mickey Mantle doing whatever he's doing, old Oklahoma boy going off. But anyway, let's get to our main event here. Ricky Steamboat defeated the Iron Sheik with Slick. The one notable thing about this is Randy Savage on commentary. So Steamboat is obviously fired up. This is weeks before their matchup at WrestleMania. And we get some of the, back and forth. This was a tune-up match, if you will, for Ricky Steamboat to get ready for challenging the IC champion that's been on a roll since. So, Belcaster, any thoughts on this match? I mean, seeing Iron Sheik in 1987 certainly has a different appeal than the one we came to know and love on social media and all these podcasts. But he was just putting guys over. He was a former world champion. He was the guy who initiated the start of Hulkamania and all that stuff. But he's still on the roster kind of giving people the rub.
Yeah, no, this was no 5-star spectacle by any means, but this was still very entertaining. Sheik looks like as good as Sheik has looked, I think, in my fandom here. Like, I'm not going back and watching him do it during his title run, but I mean, this is still fun little watch. Steamboat running shit over here on Saturday night's main event, but I'm reading all the notes here, all like just inbreaded with Jesse Ventura. It's like
Steamboat's all fired up, because he's a dragon,
But it was a quick little main event. It was probably the better of the two main events we've covered. So
I would
definitely,
say so.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it gets a nice little round of applause.
So we get a Mean Gene and Hogan segment. Hogan just tells Andre not to slip and fall because it's a long way down, brother. So you meet to the top of the mountain, you better cash it on the shot against me. And then we get that tribute video for Roddy Piper, the assumption that he's retiring. Everyone believed it, and some highlights of his career, and apparently going to be saying goodbye to Piper, even though we're yet to see his best match in WWE history. In my opinion, the one against Piper, WrestleMania 8, is one of my favorite matches ever. Luckily, he didn't retire. 5 years later, we get that magic in the ring, and we get more Piper awesome stuff. I mean, we covered him in '96, coming back to WCW. He wasn't done with wrestling, and wrestling wasn't done with him. So we got more memories, but it was awesome to see that even in '87, they still had a lot to jam pack into a tribute pack. It shows the impact he already had on the wrestling business, and he still had so much more to give.
Yeah,
and just the respect the company had for him to send him off like that.
Absolutely. So let's move into the Chaser, talk about our favorite parts of the last couple days of Saturday night's main event. Let's get to the Chaser.
The Chaser.
Here we go with the Chaser, Colton. As we know, today is Friday, 9/22. We're sitting here getting ready for the weekend that was. But let's go into first before we preview the weekend. What was your favorite part of these two nights of action?
Gotta be the cage match. The first steel cage on network TV between Paul Orndorff and Hulk Hogan. Man, this was I mean, you guys say it every week. It's no secret. Work rate is not the name of the game on Saturday night's main event, but this is by far the best of what we saw these last 2 weeks. And I don't know, man. I'm just very impressed with, like we said, WWF at this point keeping their options open. This would have been, we talk about how it wouldn't have necessarily had the impact at WrestleMania 3 if it had not been Hogan Andre. But this would have been a well-developed enough story for them to still make that the main event. And I think, props to them on that.
Oh, yeah.
Belcaster, go with you over here. I mean, you feeling the cage or is something else catching your eye?
I have to echo the statement of the cage, obviously, and for all the right reasons. And Colton hit the nail right on the head. But I am going to give mad props to seeing Lanny get busted open during that battle royal. Because I even seen the blood. I was like, God damn! And you're saying it's a gig job. I was like, no way in hell that had to have been a hard way.
I really
it was
know.
so gushy. Yeah, it was an intense.
Why would he gig in the battle royal? Was it just to put over the headbutts? Like
he was underneath the commentary table, just fucking going. But no, it was listen. It was fun to see Haku in there for a minute. I'll give the character cast that we had this last two shows were fantastic.
I have to agree with you guys. I wish I could be a contrarian here, but I mean the cage match was the best. It felt like a big match feel, and there's been a lot of matches here on Saturday night's main event that's had big match feel. And this is sort of why we picked this season, for moments like this where the legendary picture of both of them hitting down at the same time and seeing it in the moment, you appreciate it. I know like how the Magic's made type of stuff where they edit the footage. They go back to this a few times. WrestleMania 10 on the build to that with Bret Hart and Luger, which that was pretty well done. And then obviously by accident with Cena and Batista where they both fall over. And then the infamous Vince tearing his quad moment, but
both quads. Both quads.
Oh, sorry. Two quads. The best thing about the Cena and Batista one was it was organic and they legit hit at the same time. Like I still can't get over, because imagine Batista's clearly supposed to win, and they eventually had Cena earn the right elsewhere. So I guess it's not crazy. They could have had Batista win a tournament or something, go challenge Triple H at Mania or whatever.
Yeah,
but it would have. It's just crazy to me. Like they actually hit at the same time, but they edited footage here, and that's where they got the spirit from.
I loved it.
But all right, so let's get into closing the tab. Let's, the lights are coming on the bar. We are definitely overstaying our welcome here. The bartenders are cleaning up. They've been wiping the same spot in the bar over and over again, asking when are these dudes going to leave? They've been talking about wrestling for an hour and 45 minutes. Guys, we closed. Please get out of here. Let's close the tab and let's tip our bartender.
Closing the tab.
It's coming on the bar. The girl you're with, you thought she was a 10. She's actually a 3, but here we are.
It's Jesse the Body Ventura. That's who it is. He was caressing my feather earring too much, and I had to put him in his place.
So next week's episode will be episode 6 of season 5, airing on 9/29/23. We're going to be covering 2 Saturday night's main events. First of all, number 11, headlined by Randy Savage versus George Steele, again in a lumberjack match, but we also get the British Bulldogs versus the Hart Foundations and another 2 out of 3 falls match, so another hopefully great match. And then we're going to be following it up with Saturday night's main event 12, March 14th, 1987, from Detroit, Michigan, headlined by Hogan versus Sika for the WWF Championship. It's going to be some good stuff. It may not be in Detroit, honestly, because I think we were in Detroit. I left it there, but and it's not March 14th. So we're going to get Hogan. We're going to get Hogan and Sika with the fallout of WrestleMania 3. Just stay tuned next week. We're going to have you guys covered. I promise we'll talk about those the next coming events. It's going to be some good stuff. But before we go away for the night, let's get some shilling in. We're going to go rotation-wise. Colton, get your shit in. Go to Belcaster, and then I'll finish up with our shilling. So, Colton, what's going on in the world of Mullet.mania?
Shout out and big thank you to everyone who voted in the mullet competition. We started out with 247 mullets. Had to get to the top 75 to advance to round 2. You guys got me to the top fucking 60. Thank you so much. 60th best mullet in the United States. Today is the last day to vote for top 25. So please get your votes in. It's open till midnight. 1 vote per 24 hours. They're also taking donations for a wonderful cause. I don't like asking people for money because times are tight. Prices, everything's going up, but wages these days. But Jaron Allen's Home for Wounded Warriors, they're taking donations into account for scoring as well. So just something to think. If you got an extra dollar or something, throw that on there. But please, link is in my bio. The link is on my story. It's on the Tavern story. It's on ACEFIELD story. It's on Belcaster story. You guys have been great resharing everything. Shit is everywhere. Please help us bring home the Mullet Championship to the Tavern. We are so close, man. All we got to do is make the top 25, and then this waterfall will speak for itself when there's less competitors. So we should know results. Know something this coming Monday or Tuesday probably. So once again, thanks everybody for the support. The ride's been a blast.
TLC said it best, man. They said don't go chasing waterfalls because it's right here, guys. It's right in front of you. Belcast, what do you got going on? We got Fig Night. Obviously, you guys had a great episode this week.
Yeah, no, if you guys haven't met, go watch last week's because that was a blast. They opened up like a bunch of new stuff, including the FTR guys hanging out here, top guys hanging out with the formidable CM Punk, who's not hanging out.
Those Jazzware
titles look really
so
good.
Well. How's that?
They're a little thick on the back, right? Like they're not really, but they have the arms down, so they just kind of clip it. It looks good.
The Dax mustache is so epic on that.
That's the best Dax Dax hardwood.
That is a flavor saver for sure, man.
They're rocking, man. These guys are both. Look at the detail on that, very cool. But we opened up a bunch of shit, including Hook, CM Punk, Danhausen. You got the awesome Danhausen unboxing. So I'm just holding their heads over here because that's all I got. But we got Hookhausen in the plastic, not in the flesh. But yeah, Fig Night's a blast as always, guys. You know the drill. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock Central. Tune in or be tuned out. That works, right? Fucking whatever. But yeah, it's something like that. Just follow the Tavern with a little logo above my head. You guys are good.
So I also want to thank everybody for coming out and supporting Remarkable Wrestling on the night. Had a great time. There was a big house there, almost 200 people for the Motor City Machine Guns coming in and doing Remarkable Wrestling dirty. They played the heels really well there. They beat up on Kono and Tristan Ty, and they may be coming back, and they will be coming back in November for a triple threat tag match for the Remarkable Tag titles. Above the rest with the healed Gabe Sky versus Miracle Generation, the current champs, and of course Motor City Machine Guns coming in and trying to capture titles that they've never held before. It's going to be an epic night. Don't have the date yet, don't have the name of the event yet, But stay tuned on Remarkable Wrestling social media at remarkable_wrestling for future events. And of course, we have my next announcing gig, Rad Pro Wrestling 1021 Power Transfer in Amesbury, Massachusetts. So I'll be there if you guys are in the Massachusetts area. Make sure you guys come out. I may actually have some new merchandise because I just at this time, since it's airing on Friday, I just contacted Nick from Extra Cooler to make me some an inspired shirt. I have some ideas I threw his way. Some of the art he's done has inspired me that I want something of the like to have on a shirt with the ACEFIELD Retro logo, and also with, you'll see. So if you're looking to pick up a shirt and supporting me in any way, they'll be available on my Instagram story, and I'll ship them out, maybe get some stickers, and I'll of course be selling them probably in Amesbury, Massachusetts at a merch table at the VPW shows where I'm giving out stickers, and I'll have something tangible to sell outside of my trading cards and the 8x10s. And then, of course, you've got to see me at Remarkable Wrestling. Hit me up and be selling the shirts, and hopefully you guys pick one up. But, yeah, some good stuff here. Brace for Impact. Thank you guys for watching yesterday. Another great episode, the second half of 1,000 episodes of Impact Wrestling, crushing it over there. And then also Wrestling Tonight. Thank you guys for checking out this week, having conversations about Jade Cargill making her new home in Stamford, Connecticut. Talked about previewing Grand Slam. We saw what an amazing event that was at Arthur Ashe this week. So another out of the park moment for Samoa Joe and MJF, and what a moment it was. And even though we're taping in advance, I'm confident that MJF choked Samoa Joe out. That's my prediction. I'm sticking to it. And Prince Nana is going to do some swerving when he drives, and all that good stuff. But the Tavern is thriving right now. We continue to crush it. And it's so, Colton, it's so good to have you back. And we've been loving this season of Shot Nostalgia with Saturday Night's Main Event, but it's even better to join you here with us because honestly, the threesome you mentioned before, it is an absolute blast to do a triple threat version of this. Get your take on this, and you bring such a good flavor to the show. And I wish you could do every episode with us.
Dude, me too. And I thank you guys so much for the kind words and just welcoming me back with open arms, man. I love doing Shot of Nostalgia. It's a lot of fun to jump back in here. And I'll be back. I'm going to be back for a few more here this season. So y'all stay tuned.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we have some things cooked up for. Obviously, we talked last week about potentially doing the rerun season where we're going to just release the audio of WCW 1996, because that is something every time I talk to someone about Shot of Nostalgia, they don't want to listen on YouTube because every time they shut it off, it disappears. So they want to be able to put it on their car or wherever. So they want WCW 1996 in audio form. So it is coming. And I think that's after this season, after these 18 episodes are done, I think we're just going to release that in audio week after week for 30 episodes. But I also think, putting it out there, just NXT takeovers, dude. Like, I think that holds a lot of weight. Maybe we'll start getting those bulked up and put those out there and rewatching what the Black and Gold were able to do. And there's a lot of great, golden content out there, evergreen stuff that we can consume. So that's the best part about all this, man. Like, this season has grown out of the love of retro wrestling, but diving deep into these other things has created just a different appreciation for me. Like, watching even these Saturday Night's Main Events, I know people, like Tom always tells us about the time that he was a fan and nothing would be better. And watching what our set of eyes will never be the same as watching from his set of eyes from that time and day. But we can also gain a context of really through understanding the backstage stuff and also the bigger events. Now I'll never watch WrestleMania 3 the same again. And that's the best part about this. Here. With a growing knowledge, it's the best part.
Absolutely. Couldn't have been said better myself.
So that's all we got for you. Belcaster, lead us out. Jesse Ventura, and all that good stuff.
Well, we're going to speak to you before the melatonin kicks in here, Monsoon. Okay. I'm piling it by the handfuls now to power all of my Teslas. I got to get a good night's sleep. Perfect 6 hours, if you will. But, guys, make sure you tune in next week for all the Saturday Night's Main Event craziness going on here, right? We're good. Jesse out. He's so out.